this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. I am really looking forward to this episode today. This is one of our consulting calls, but it is also an opportunity for you out there to get to know another practitioner who has started their own practice. So learning about that climb, and then we'll be answering one of her questions today. So welcome, Lauren Glynn, to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. If you could introduce yourself to the audience.
So my name is Lauren Glynn. I'm an LMHC. I'm licensed in Massachusetts, in Rhode Island. I've had a long journey working in mental health. I've done it for since my master's, probably 11 years, and worked in different arenas in undergrad and even in high school a little bit. So I've really been doing this for most of my life. It was something that I wanted to do in high school, and I just kept going. And it just, I feel like I'm kind of living my dream right now, which is wonderful. So I got my undergraduate degree in psychology and studio art at Florida Southern College. So I kind of did both. I did like a double major, and then I went on to get my master's degree at Boston College in the Lynch School, so for mental health counseling. And I did an internship at the ACI, so that's the prison in Rhode Island, working with sex offenders. And I kind of carried that on once I graduated graduate school and worked in a residential setting for juvenile sex offenders and kind of stuck with group homes. And then sort of my last bit of community mental health was the Providence Center, where I worked with children and families for about 8 years doing outpatient counseling. And I feel like I really gained a lot from that. All of my experience has been really helpful to get me where I am today.
So very versatile. So one thing I want to ask about that, I remember back when I was working in community mental health and really got exposure to a lot. And it was a great opportunity to learn those clients that I do my best work with and those that I do not want to work with. And I would think that sex offenders would be one of those populations for some people that could be so challenging. Tell me more about that work for you, because you even continued on beyond that initial introduction.
Yeah, so I worked in a sex offender treatment program. My supervisor, Pete Loss, he was amazing. He worked there for about 20 years, and I think he was a big reason why I was able to stay and continue that work. I was young. I was in my 20s. So I didn't have any kids of my own, and I felt like, something has to be done with this. And I found these people to be very intriguing because, we all kind of feel like, how could that happen? And then once you meet them, you kind of understand how that can happen.
Right.
A lot of them mentally, their mental age is so much younger than, they were 40, 50, 60 years old, but they were mentally really middle school people. So it was really interesting, eye-opening. Some of them really did want to get help and change. And then some of them, went through this program because it looked good to get them out on parole sooner. So, I just felt like it was a great opportunity, and I learned a lot from it. And then I went and worked with juvenile sex offenders after that. And I felt like that was helpful because it was kind of catching them early.
Yes.
And not, it was there might have been one or two circumstances, and they were able to you're kind of able to shift it a little bit and teach them, skills. And so I felt like it was really just eye-opening, and I feel like it provided a really good foundation for my work now.
Okay, and really impactful work. So I understand that you recently started your own practice. So tell us about that process.
Yes. So about a year ago, I started thinking, okay, I'm probably going to do like full-time community mental health for another year. So I want to have all my ducks in a row so that when I start, everything will be lined up, ready to go. So I started, I did a Psychology Today. I got an LLC. Found the software I wanted to use. So I used Simple Practice. I consulted with people about what they use, what they found helpful, and kind of set all that up. I took like 2 clients. So it was after my full-time job, and I also had 2 kids. So it was a lot, and I just wanted to, stick with 2, get my feet wet. So I did that for about a year. And then, about a month and a half ago, I left my full-time job and just kind of dove into private practice.
And how has it been so far?
So, exciting, but also like I'm so used to being insanely busy and, having, being in school and maybe an internship and maybe a job and just having every minute scheduled that now it's just kind of strange because I can do things like this.
Yes.
And I can screen people to see if they're a good fit for me or not, because in community mental health, it's kind of like you take whatever comes at you.
Yes.
So now it's going to take some getting used to. Even though it's positive, it's still an adjustment. And it's funny, friends I talk to, they're like, oh my gosh, you must be just like so excited, so relieved. And I am to some extent, but I'm like, this is not the way I operate. I operate on a very tight schedule. And now I'm trying to I don't know, it's just a lot more laid back, and I'm just not used to it, but I'm working on it, getting there.
So I can relate to everything that you're saying. So the journey and the way that you slowly dipped your toe in and then gradually built your practice and then finally felt ready to take that plunge. And then this kind of reality check or almost culture shock of this is what you were used to and this is where you are now, and really having that autonomy and that independence and that ability to create your own schedule, but you now have to decide what you want that schedule filled with, rather than all of these obligations and things that other people are saying, here's the box to check, or I need you for this, or this needs to get done with this deadline. You're now able to sit and say, all right, so what clients do I want to fill my caseload with? How do I want to structure my day? When am I going to fit in that admin time? Does that sound?
Yes, that sounds exactly how I'm feeling right now. And I think I'm so used to, from working in community mental health, really adjusting myself to everyone else's needs, to where that's really been difficult for me, because I still find myself bending to try to fit other people's needs when it actually hurts me. So I keep trying to remind myself, you're doing this. You went into your private practice in order to help it fit your life. Why are you bending? And it's just, I feel like it's been ingrained in me for a long time. So now I'm really just trying to, I don't know, adjust my thinking and sort of just to have a different perspective on it.
So I'm hearing the theme. If you had to put it into a question, what would you say is the main thing that I can be helpful with today from a consulting perspective?
How do you navigate and balance meeting your needs and meeting your clients' needs? That's it.
Yes.
I don't even know how else to describe it. It's just, and trying to figure out how to set limits, I guess, and set limits with them and saying this is my boundary. Because when you did work community mental health, it's okay, you work 8 to 4. okay, great. So they need to schedule in that time. And now it's like, well, I mean, I guess I could do that time, but I know that's going to make every other part of my life much more stressful, but I really want to help these people. And it's just and it's like, well, they're working too. And it's just tough. I think I relate to like my clients and their families, and I feel like they're in the same boat I am sometimes. So I find myself bending, which I really need to work on, because then you kind of get resentful and you don't do your best work.
Well, thank you for asking this, because I know that this question in and of itself is helpful for me to think about and reflect on. I know that it's going to resonate with those that are listening. And you and I had talked briefly before we started recording about how this is such a great opportunity for me to talk to you at the stage that you're at and reflect back to when I started my own practice in 2017. What would I have told that earlier version of myself so that I could promote longevity, stay in this field, continue to enjoy the work, maintain that passion? And fortunately I have, but there would have been some things that I would have done differently. And now managing a team, these are things that I'm trying to demonstrate and serve as a role model to my team, because they're better clinicians the more balanced they are, the better that they manage their stress, the more work-life balance that they have. And I struggled so much with this concept that you're talking about. So first and foremost, I want to say the fact that you're asking yourself this question at this point is such an incredible thing, because I think the majority of us don't necessarily realize that we're at the burnout point until it's too late. And you are checking in with yourself about it early on so you can set yourself up for success and put some things in place that are going to be helpful for you in the long haul. So the first thing I would say is thinking a little bit about where that initial message came from that I think so many of us in a helping profession get, that we need to be all the things for all the people, this obligatory nature that we have. If somebody reaches out, they want to work with me, they need this time, they need this service. We are not meant to be everything to everyone. It is absolutely okay for us to identify that ideal client, think about that schedule that we want to have that works not only primarily for us, but then for our families, and then ultimately for our clients, because I know you'll relate to the fact that we are better as therapists when we are well rested, when we have that opportunity to take those breaks and eat throughout the day, when we get to go on vacations, when we can be there for the family time, when we can have a social life and spirituality and all of those things in the pie. But if we don't consider that stuff early, and it's not automatically in our nature to do that, then the entire plate gets full. And it's like, but wait a minute, I know I need these things and I know they're important, but where are they going to fit? And the worst thing that can happen is we can start to build this resentment toward maybe our clients or our team. And we want to try to avoid getting to that point so that we can really show up. So any thoughts on that piece before I kind of give some concrete, tangible tips? Does any of that sound relatable?
Oh, that's all relatable to me. And, when I did leave my full-time job, I was like, do I even want to keep doing this? And I knew I was at the point of burnout with that, in just home life and balancing everything. And even now I'm a little like, I really want to take it easy, because I know what the burnout feels like, and I don't want to get back there. And I almost at times don't trust myself to have good enough boundaries not to get there.
Yes.
So part of me is like, not trying very hard to increase my caseload, even though I want to. It's like this, I don't know, it's this push and pull. I'm like excited. I actually love my job. I love my profession. It gives me energy. And I'm scared. I'm hesitant because of like my past experience.
That piece that you just spoke to is so important to point out and reiterate. You're saying how you love what you do so much and you're so passionate that it almost like fuels you. It fires you up in a good way. And I think that is something that is so beautiful, but that can also work against us, because for me, and it sounds like for you, doing the work does recharge us, that it is not necessarily as depleting for us as maybe this work might be for someone else, or a different type of work may be for someone else. And so I think sometimes we can kind of continue to go not on autopilot, but without as much thought behind the actions. It's like, I'm naturally a helper. This is what I do. I love working with people and helping them achieve a higher level of functioning and hearing their stories and offering these strategies. So my thought would be a couple of tangible things that come to mind. Someone very early on had given me this kind of equation, and I use this in my consulting work all the time, where when you're starting your own business, you think to yourself, okay, what do I need to earn in order to be able to provide for my family and to provide the type of life that I want to have? And you get that number in your head and you work backwards. So you think to yourself, okay, so the average insurance reimbursement, if you're taking insurance, or, basing your hourly rate, what ultimately works for me in terms of how many hours I want to work, how many days I want to work, and then you're dividing so that you're setting your fee or the number of clients based on what fits you instead of the other way around. And then you don't veer from that. And if you do, you're doing it with a conscious choice, and it's not based off of this necessity. You already have your number. You already know that if that minimum number of clients shows up, you can pay all of the bills and you have your savings and your expenses are paid. And so if you ultimately opt to take on a new client, that's a bonus. In addition to that, what I would say is get so clear in your initial practice policies about what your particular policy is going to be about cancellations and no-shows. So for those of us that are private pay, you have that option to charge your full fee. You can charge a fraction of your fee. For those of us that accept insurance, if it's a Medicaid product, we're not able to charge. But for those other insurances, we can. And so the clearer you are at the outset of that therapeutic relationship, where you're providing the clear expectation, this is what's expected of you, this is what's expected of me, you have that credit card on file to charge in those instances where there's a late cancellation or a no-show and it's not an emergency, that is going to help tremendously, because having that conversation after the fact, when you've already developed that therapeutic relationship and the client comes in and they've just experienced a breakup, they're going through a divorce, they're having financial difficulty, they lost their job. It is so much harder to have that conversation because we care about our clients as humans in a professional way. And it is so difficult, but you have a bill, or how about that copay? So you just set up that system right out the gate and they're clear and you're clear. So I feel like that piece helps tremendously. Those are two key things I would talk about. Any thoughts on that? Have those things already been in place for you, or those things you struggle with?
They are things I struggle with. I've never had to deal with billing at all. And I was always very grateful for that. I never wanted to, but now I am. And through simple practice, I do have all my policies and everything. So with new clients, it's easy, no problem. I have some clients that I've seen at the Providence Center for 8 years. And they had to follow me. They didn't care. I do private pay. They were like, I will pay out of pocket. I don't care. So I'm actually trying to I just signed up for Reimbursify. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have not.
Oh, great. I actually met with the co-founder on a Zoom call yesterday. So it's a program that I sign up for and I pay monthly. And they just have to click a button and it submits to their insurance so they can get reimbursed. It is amazing. I will send you the information on
Beautiful.
it. You can do it. I don't have my website up and going right now, but you'll be able to do it on the website. There's an app. It's wonderful. So I'm doing all I can because I'm private pay and I don't want to deal with insurance right now, just to accommodate clients, because I don't want them to break the bank on this, you know? And a lot of my clients that came from the Providence Center, they don't have the means to do this. So with that said, my previous clients, I'm really working with them financially to keep them. And I'm okay with that because, I've been with them for so long and I know they want to stay with me. But it is also when I worked for an agency, my relationship with them was a little different. So, they might cancel, they might, the boundaries were a little different than they are now. So I think that's really a really tough transition to go from them seeing me at an agency and now them seeing me privately.
I can definitely see how that would be challenging, but you're having the conversations and this is a different setting. And I think most people can understand the fact that this is now you. This is your business. This is your practice. This is your livelihood. And as much as we don't want to put the responsibility for that on a client, we can utilize that as justification for why we're really adhering to this policy. And I have also changed how I communicate with clients about the therapeutic relationship, and I train the clinicians in my practice to do the same. Where not only are they signing that policy, but we're making sure session one, we're reviewing it, because most people will check the box and electronically sign and not actually read it. We want them to have the opportunity to ask any questions that they have, and for us also to provide any clarification. But it is regularly reintroduced whenever there is that cancellation. So it's not the first time they've heard it. They have access to the portal. I use Simple Practice as well. So it's in there. Sometimes I need to resend it or highlight a certain section. But then it becomes this kind of fluid document that we refer to, and it's less of a surprise. So it sounds like you're doing that. And with new clients, it's a lot easier. You're starting off on the right foot. With these other clients, they know the value of working with you, and they can also understand the fact that that spot was reserved for them. There's preparation on your part that goes into these sessions. And if there is that late cancellation or no-show, you then don't have that ability, as we know, but this is what I explain to clients, to fill that slot with someone else in need. So not only are they not getting the benefit of the therapy, and that's not helpful if they're not getting consistent treatment, but then in addition, someone else is not able to get that help. And we are most definitely in a mental health crisis. There are waiting lists everywhere. There are just not enough providers to meet the need. So sometimes when it's appropriate, that's a conversation that I'll delve into with them. But it's not easy. And I think it gets better with time. I know it does. It takes a little bit of practice. You have to kind of figure out your verbiage. But ultimately, I think the other piece that's important to shift is getting out of this scarcity mindset, and not saying that this is you, but I think some of the listeners can relate to when it is your practice. Even if you have a plethora of referrals at any one time, we worry. Are those going to dry up? And especially private pay, I'm sure for you, the marketing efforts are different, building that reputation, showing that value for the work that you're providing and the therapy that you're providing is important. And so I'm sure there's those moments where you might pause and say, are these referrals going to keep coming? I don't want to lose these clients. And I guess what I'm here to say is those clients will come. There is such a need, and you are starting off on the right foot, and it will continue to build. But is that a thought that you've had before?
Yes, I have. And especially if it's like during a good time. So if it's like 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, I'm like, oh, take them, like that's perfect. So that is definitely a thought I've had. Yes.
Well, and another thing I would think of too, and I can tell you may fall into this category of like a multi-passionate. So that's how I describe myself. I was never able to find just one job that met every need. And I think going back to what you were saying, when you had this time in your life where every single second was scheduled and filled and, you were just going all the time. I think that I know that there's beauty in the slowing down. And if you do have someone that cancels or you have a spot that's really tough to fill, that doesn't mean that has to be wasted time. As we know, we can always fill it with administrative tasks, documenting and getting caught up. But then in addition, brainstorming these other ideas, whether that's a group or a workshop, maybe you want to join a consultation group or be on a podcast or whatever the case may be. Those are those opportunities to really slow down, get creative, utilize that time, and it can eventually bring in revenue depending on what it is. But I think it's shifted my idea of that like idle time, so to speak, that really doesn't have to be idle. And it is okay if we just use that time to take a little break. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I was thinking like, I like to read, obviously, and like read up on all these new, new
like modalities and
like that. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a good time to do that.
Absolutely.
And to do trainings, and there's so many resources out there and so much information. I spend a lot of time doing that, especially during my downtime. So I never feel like it's wasted. I think my biggest goal right now is creating a good work-life balance. So I feel like right now it was like too much work, not enough life, and now it's like too much life, not enough work. But I'll get there.
Yes.
So I'm trying to be easy on myself
Yes.
as well, because I'm usually very hard on myself about this stuff. Like, oh my gosh, I have downtime, and I was burned out. So I feel like I'm recovering, honestly. So like doing stuff like this and getting to read some research, going to trainings, it's revitalizing me a little bit. So I am enjoying it. And when I get a little hard on myself, I try to remind myself, like, I'm sort of in recovery right now.
Yes.
So
that's a beautiful thing. So another thing, if I were to tell you that 1 month from now, your practice was going to be completely full, every spot has a client in it, then wouldn't you look at this next month completely different? And you're already starting to, right? So, you're getting revitalized and you are kind of recharging. And like you said, developing this work-life balance, get those positive habits. I would totally recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear, one of the most transformative books that I have read this year. But it is all about how we can set ourselves up for success by creating these habits and building off of the habits we already have in place and being more conscientious with how we spend that downtime so that we can be the most functional beings, but also maintain that wellness and, on all fronts. So with that being said, a couple of other tips that I want to make sure that I mention are, we had talked a little bit before we were recording about how accommodating we can be in this profession and how you may be really good about these are my days and these are my hours. And we also have to get really clear, how many clients does it make sense for us to see in a day? And that's a very personal, subjective thing. Some of us, we all have different points where we're like, you know what, this is it for me today. And it might take a little bit to figure that out, but I would really get clear on that number. And what I will say to you, and this was my own experience, and I speak from that, if you say to someone, this is the time I have, this is when I'm available, and that's that. If they are really committed to therapy and therapy with you, they're going to be there. And if not, they will ultimately find another therapist if therapy is what they're looking for. And you're going to continue to network and meet other clinicians and develop that list if you don't already have one of who you can refer to. Everyone will find their place. And you will thank yourself for maintaining that boundary down the line, because you'll be proud of the fact that you were able to balance all of it, because it is going to get busier and the tasks just continue to pile up. So that's another thing that was on my mind. Thoughts on that?
Yeah,
so is that piece, I know we had
helpful.
talked about how that's challenging. Speak to that component.
To what component? I'm sorry.
The being accommodating and really trying to set that limit around, this is when I'm available, this is when I can see you. But then we make those adjustments. And when you make that adjustment, how does that feel?
Right. When I make the adjustment and accommodate when I know that I can't, that does not feel good. I become a little resentful and I regret it. And I'm like, look, like this time is really hard for me. And it just makes my life so much more difficult. Like having little kids, I mean, between 4 and 7, it's chaos. So like, I really cannot see people during that time. Like I can't. And that's not forever in my life, but that's right now. And I need to be okay with that. And my clients need to be okay with that. And if they're not, there are plenty of people, plenty of clinicians
It is true.
who do work those hours
Right.
for whatever reason. It works for them. So you're right. Trying to come up with really a list of referrals for these people.
Because it never feels good to turn someone away. But the piece you're speaking to is really that ripple effect. So I think for us, keeping in mind that in that moment, it feels good to be accommodating and provide someone with what they need, but that's very short term. In the long term, when you ultimately do continue to make those accommodations one after another, it affects every other aspect of your life. You are going into a session at a time when you mentally were not preparing yourself to do that. It's going to affect those obligations with your family or that time for you or documentation or whatever the case may be. We're not ultimately doing our best work in those moments. So yes, I think if we have that list handy that we can provide, if we stay firm and go back to the agency days, the agency was open from this time to this time, and that was that. And the clients or consumers knew that maybe there was an on-call service, but other than that, this is when you're available. And I think we have to adopt that same mentality because there isn't anyone else enforcing that for us. And it's okay for us to be that person for ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was interesting because in the agency days, I did have people like scheduling for me. And then once COVID started, I started working remotely. I worked remote for the Providence Center for 3 years. And, you know, it was great that I was able to do that. I was able to continue working and seeing all my clients, and they needed it, you know, but it did kind of create blurry lines in the work-life balance. And I remember I would accommodate people at 5 o'clock, and that's when my daughter, like, it was just, I made an office in my basement, and I would just hear like chaos upstairs. I couldn't be present for these people. So now I'm really trying to make sure that I am just keeping those boundaries as much as possible. And I do put in my planner, like after a certain time with a black Sharpie, I just cross it off like, no.
Right. Good for you. And I think that visual is so helpful. Most people like us need to put in that time for other things in there. Like it's scheduled just like anything else. And we're so much more likely to adhere to it. And one final thought I would leave you with is considering a virtual assistant. And I know that might sound outrageous because you're like, it's just me and, you know, I'm building and the referrals are there, but I can't say enough positive things about how incredible it has been to pay someone well, but a fraction of what we make for a clinical hour to be the one that is helping to navigate all of that administrative stuff. And they're all different, but as you build that trust and they really prove that they're capable, you can gradually add more and more responsibilities. And we now have an administrative assistant that helps with everything from that initial point of contact with client inquiries, sending the intake paperwork, following up on payments, sending out invoices. She'll do a follow-up phone call after 3 sessions to see if people are feeling positive about therapy, feel like they were paired with the right clinician, any tips for how we can improve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There have been little projects I've been able to ask her, and she takes it and runs with it. So just something to consider, and I'm happy to share some resources. And I think it really helps us to focus on that zone of genius and the best work that we can do when you know that things are being taken care of. And you can pick and choose. What are the things you absolutely love doing administratively and on the business end? And what are the things that maybe are not your favorite? So I would definitely encourage 3 columns. So track it. Do a time audit. What are the things that you're doing that you absolutely love, you look forward to, it's in your schedule, and you're geared up for it? The things that are kind of neutral, like they're not necessarily things you have to do. Someone else could do them. You could kind of take it or leave it. And then the third column are like, you know what? I despise this. I don't enjoy it. I can't wait for it to be over. It's not something I'm ever going to be really savvy about. And those are the things. And I would also say the middle column that you could ultimately outsource to someone else. So. Yeah, so there's a final tip. So let everyone know about your practice. What is the name of the practice? What is the best way for them to reach out if they're looking for counseling? And a little bit about your specialty and your ideal client.
So the name of my practice is just Lauren Glynn Psychotherapy. It's based out of Warren, Rhode Island. Okay. So on Water Street in Warren, it's in this little Cape house. It's above Wedge Cheese Shop now. So My specialties really, I've been working with children and families, adolescents. I really enjoy working with teenagers and young adults. I'm trained in eating disorder treatment, so I know there's a need for that. And I did do a lot of eating disorder treatment with clients that were medically unstable, but now in my private practice, I'm really trying to see people that are medically stable, but more of like the eating disorder cognitions, because it's, I don't have like the on-call stuff that other agencies might have. So I'm still seeing eating disorder clients. I'm also seeing adults like anxiety, depression. So, I mean, my ideal client would be someone who is really just wanting to like work on themselves, and maybe they have some anxiety, they have some depression, some relationship issues, conflict, and that, maybe they could see me during the day. That's really important, as we talked about.
Sure. But so much easier now that people can be virtual. Do that on a lunch break, go out to their car as long as they're not driving it. So we have so much more flexibility and accessibility than ever before.
Right. Yes.
Beautiful.
So
Well, thank you.
One good thing that came from COVID is that we do have the telehealth, and I feel like it's making it so much more accessible to people who, don't want to drive an hour for counseling every week. So, yeah.
Agreed. Well, congratulations on your practice. I really appreciate you taking the time today to share some of your journey and ask a question that I am confident is something that those listening can definitely relate to. I hope you all found that there were some takeaways, and I will make sure to include all of your contact information for those that would like to learn more or work with you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Julia.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.